Okay, so this is episode 10 now of the Drift Car 2 build series, and we're going to be working on we're going to get started on building the roll cage for the car. So the first step in building the roll cage is to make the base plates. So in this episode, I'm going to go over making 6 out of the 8 base plates. And I'm only covering 6 out of 8 because the last 2 are going to get done towards the very end of the cage build. First thing to do is go over the rules. So of course, I'm building everything to Formula Drift specifications. Anytime that you're building a roll cage, you should build it to some sort of standard. Formula Drift is basically the biggest organization in the United States as far as drifting goes. And every Pro-Am competition or every local track event is going to basically use Formula Drift's tech rules for their own tech. So the safest route to go with making a cage is to make it to Formula Drift standards. Now right here are the 2015 Formula Drift rulebook. Basically this is at least the section that pertains to the roll cage, which is what we're covering right now. And this right here is a section regarding the base plates, and I'm going to go over the main things right now. So those are the rules regarding the base plates, and the base plates in this video comply with all of these rules. So the first 2 base plates to make are for the main hoop. Okay, so I'm prepping for making the base plates. I basically just cleared off all the sealant over there, and now I'm using cardstock to make a template. So this is basically the template that I came up with. Comes over here, there's going to be a bend over here that I have to put in it, and then comes straight down here, and I just cut it off right where it needs to bend back over. And of course this goes along with the handbook as far as the regulations for the length of everything, and yeah. So now that I have the template, I'm just going to go ahead and transfer it over to a piece of metal, cut it out, put the bend in it, put it over here, and test fit. Okay, so here's the piece after bending it and doing some trimming on the sides to make it sit better. That's basically what we get. And just for all you guys out there wondering, you can't always get these 100% flush around everything just because, the floor curves differently over here and it, dimples in. So it's one of those things where it's like you have to get it just as flush as possible, which is, you hear how it sits? I mean, it's like, it's down there, so good. So now I'm just gonna go and make another one for that side. Okay, so I got this one trimmed up as well. Same thing, fits nicely in place. Okay, so now I did have the base plate tacked into place, but then I went over the FD Tech book a couple more times, as well as looked at other people's cages and talked with them about it. And really, this base plate should extend to all the vertical sections possible. So that means extending down over here, as well as extending up over here, and then it'll extend to the vertical sections, which is more compliant to the rules. Okay, so I didn't show it because it was quite a tedious process, but it's just like the usual. Get some cardstock, then keep cutting it out with some scissors and everything until you get a template for the piece of metal that you want to cut. Now I can just take this over to my 12 gauge, trace it out, and then cut it, and then trim it up, and get it to fit. Oh my god. So just with that one little bend right there, fits up pretty nice. And as you might be able to tell, there's a little extra left on the top over here. And I actually want this plate to slide on top of this one. So what I'm gonna do is weld this piece in place first. Then I'll go and take my angle grinder and shave it down, so that way it fits perfect. And then I can just slide this base plate on top of it and then weld this plate on top. So of course the usual thing before welding, just prep it, take it down, make sure it's all nice bare metal. Wipe it down with acetone. Same thing with the actual chassis itself. Okay, and so I'm gonna want this to slide over top. So before I do that, I want to make this plate right here to the same degree. So I'm just gonna take my little mini sledge, hit this and make it the same exact measurement. Then after that, I'm just gonna keep grinding it down until this base plate slides over top. And then once that slides over top, I can actually weld everything together. See, and so now, trimmed it down, slides right over top, perfect fitment. I just gotta make it flush, tack it in place, and then weld all the way around it. Okay, so kind of brushed off a little bit. These ones are pretty solid, these ones are pretty solid. Back here got a little bit over here was good though. The beginning over here was good, over here got kind of iffy. Along this wall over here was good. Near the bottom, it's just super hard to get a good angle in there, so those never come out good. And then this wall over here was pretty solid. So overall I'm pretty happy with it. It's pretty solid. Yep. Okay, now for over here, I did say I was going to go up into this one panel and make a vertical here for the base plate. The reason I didn't do that was because if I went over here, it would have been under 2 inches. Over here, it would have still been just shy of 2 inches. So you really aren't really even meeting that 2-inch rule. On top of that, as you can, well, maybe you can tell, I can flex this sheet metal with my hand. So to me, tying in a vertical piece right here wasn't actually even going to do anything as far as the structural integrity of the cage. And it was just going to take away space from my welder being able to weld around the main hoop. So all in all, I just did the vertical here, the horizontal here, and then just left this because it seems absolutely pointless to weld something in that small and on this weak of metal. Next is the base plate for the side hoop. So first thing to do when getting started on the base plates is just to figure out where you want to place it, and once where you want to place it, you kind of just have to figure out your measurements. So I've already decided on my measurements that it's going to be 2 inches wide over here. I'm initially going to cut it at 4 inches tall with everything and then trim it down later. So 2x4 over here, another 2x4 piece over here. Then there's going to be a 3-inch length, 4-inch tall, and then another piece over here that's going to go on top of this because it's going to have more support for the roll cage if it's actually built on top of this. So that's going to go 2.75 inches in and then 3 inches long. So now that I have all of those dimensions down, I can go and cut it out of the sheet metal. Now it comes time to cut out all the individual pieces of metal that are going to make up the base plate. So I already know the dimension for this, which is going to be a 2x4 piece similar to this one. So I already have 2 inches marked along here, so this is 2 inches thick. And now I need to mark where 4 inches is going to be. So I have this set at 4 inches. I can set the mark right there. There I go. Now I have a line right there to cut for 4 inches, and there's already a line right here to cut for 2 inches. And that's basically what you do. Repeat that process for all the little measurements. Then just take my flap disc onto the metal, take off any surface rust, get it prepped for welding, clean up the edges. So all the rust is taken off of this, all the edges are cleaned up, so this is basically prepped for welding, except for wiping it down with acetone. So just keep on repeating this process and cutting out all different pieces that you need for your base plates until you eventually get what you want. So I have all my pieces individually cut now. They're all prepped, all the corners and stuff are ground down. And basically you're just going to put them together like a little puzzle and then just tack weld them in place for right now. So I have it mocked up over here with magnets and kind of just tack it in place, and then add another panel, tack it in place, add another panel, tack it in place. So now it's been tacked into place using the welding magnets, and next up is to trim the piece like the other side in order to get it to fit the floor. That way you can get good welds in. I've got some cardstock that's roughly the same size, and I'm just going to trim it with some scissors in order to get this to sit flush on the ground, so that way I know how much to trim my actual base plate in order to get it to sit on the ground. So now, as you can see, that's where one of the ends of the base plate is going to be at, and so I've trimmed this to fit. Now I can just transfer this over to my actual base plate and then trim it down to fit. So here are all the templates that are done now that I've trimmed up, and it's kind of just a matter of mocking it up and then cutting it out. Here's the template all taped up over here. I'm just going to take it, angle grinder, cut off this. Now, as you can see, it fits the template, so now we can test fit it. So after test fitting and trimming many times, I got it to fit nice. So it sits perfect right where it's supposed to. And there's that one as well. Put this in, line it up where it's supposed to go, which is right there. It's very nice and even on the bottoms. There isn't like any really big, huge gaps for the most part. A lot of it is actually just touching. The next base plate to make is for the main hoop support, and that's going to attach to the rear shock tower over here. Just like everything else, made a template out of cardstock. So this slides over the top. Got this piece over here, and this piece over here. Now this is one of the beefiest designs you can do. A lot of times people, they don't do this. Instead they just wrap it around like that. However, with this design, it caps off the top of the shock tower, reinforcing it. On top of that, this detaches all the way down to the floor, and so you can imagine this basically creates like a cap effect on the top of this shock tower. So when the suspension is moving up, this entire thing is going to keep it down. Anyways, once the cardstock was cut over here, I then transferred that to pieces of metal. With all that cut out, you get this rough sketch of how it's supposed to be, so it has extra left on it so it can get trimmed down to shape. So now that I know that this fits, I have everything trimmed to size, I'm going to take this one, put it onto more pieces of cardstock as well as metal, and then cut it out for the other side. One piece. So under here I have the piece that I've cut out for the driver's side, and I have the passenger side one over here. This is the one that I already know fits. So I'm going to use it as a template. However, in order to get the holes in this original one, I just used a paper template to do it. And then I just put this strut tower brace template on top of there just to make sure the holes were lined up. And that's all you really have to do. So yeah, paper template works fine, but I'm using the metal one because I know for sure it fits and I already did the work. I removed the template on top, made sure that the holes are center, and I'm going to enlarge them to the proper diameter. Now in order to see where to drill the hole saw, took a little straight edge like this, end to end. The holes are about 4.5 inches apart. So I just divided that by 2, and I got the little center point, and then I put a center punch in it, and now I can go with my drill press, put the hole there, and then make that as the pilot and guide my hole saw. Now I'm using my 1/2 inch drill to drill the 2 1/4 inch hole saw through here. The drill press I would use, but it doesn't have enough power to do it. So as you can see with the 3 holes cut right here, slides over the top and there. Now when fitting up the base plate, in order to get it to tuck against the shock tower all the way at the top, I actually need to grind down some of these stitch welds. So So I'm going to grind down the 2 over here as well as the 2 on the back side, and that should get it sitting flush. Next thing to do is to trim up the sides of this base plate so it all fits together. The passenger side has already been trimmed up and everything meets and has a nice joint. So that's ready to get tacked into place and then welded all together. So I'm going to do that on the driver's side. It's basically just a whole bunch of work with an angle grinder and a cutoff disc or a flap disc to trim it and then get everything to sit how I want it to. And that's why there's so much extra left on everything, so it can get rough cut and then trim perfectly down to size. So I trimmed up all the base plates to fit on the car. Then I took an angle grinder and cleaned up the surface, took off any surface rust, made it nice clean bare metal. Now I have everything positioned where it's going to be, and I'm just going to tack weld it in 2 spots on each side in order to hold it together, and then I can take off the base plate from the car and trim it up.
Infinite power, infinite power.
So here's the base plate, which is a box now. I can weld on the inside just in little sections and then turn to the outside and then trim every single edge to make it perfectly flush. So I'm just going to be doing a few tacks. Make it basically like this. These aren't really at the full heat because kind of just wanted to tack them in just so that they don't move, nothing else really. Especially considering because this is very close to the shock tower, so I didn't want to make any like long stitches with it. So here's the base plate as I had it tacked up, and then here's the base plate all trimmed to actually fit on the car. All it takes is an angle grinder and a flap disc, grind down the extra leftover metal, and then make it a really flush, really clean design. And that's basically why I left so much extra metal on it, so I can make it perfectly flush. So pretty much just a bunch of this. And there we go, now all the edges are made flush. Okay, now as you can see right here, all these corners conform to the shock tower. Same with back here. And this is how it starts out, as just a box basically. So what I'm going to do is put a punch right at this corner and then hammer it so it folds the metal in and actually contours exactly to the shock tower. And I'll also be doing it to this corner over here. So then in the end you get a really nice design on it and it doesn't just look like you welded a box onto your shock tower. And besides the aesthetics of it, if it just comes out straight over here, you're not going to like bridge a 1-inch gap with weld. So you need to have the metal either come down and bend over here, or you got to cut it here so you can actually weld all the way around it. Now I've got to trim off this piece so I can hammer it some more.
Infinite power.
See, so now there's just a little bit of lip here, so it's just a matter of matching the contour with it and then doing that on this side, and then after that trimming the back. See what I'm talking about right here. Now that I have my bends in, the next step is to round off this top plate right here, such as on this one. That way it can match the curve of the shock tower itself. And just like with the bends over here, not only does it look good, but it's also functional because it makes this lip the same height as where I'm going to be welding to. So rather than me having to bridge something, it's going to be a nice flush weld. Just like with everything, it's going to take angle grinder going back on and off on the car, so I'm not going to show that. So now you can see the base plates trimmed to fit and mocked up in the position they're going to be welded in. So now I'm going to take them off of the car so I can weld the outside of the base plates. See, this is the one I already did too. Solid. So both the towers are welded up right now. I didn't weld all the way around to the corner And I just want to do that when it's in the car, so just in case I need to do any final adjustment on the edges, I don't have all this welded up. On top of that, when stuff does have bends on it, it kind of tends to straighten out or get a little weird when you start putting heat into it. So just as a little safety precaution, I didn't weld all the way to the very edge. Also, you'll notice there's a lot of weld spatter on here, and that's because I didn't use any anti-spatter spray, which I probably should have done, so I'm going to have to hit that up with a grinder just to clean all that up, which I will before I put all that in.
Anyways. There's this one. This one isn't cleaned up, but you get the idea.
It's ready to be welded in now, so as always, I'm just going to prep it, take it down to bare metal, and the next thing we'll be doing is welding them in place. I'm going to show you a little comparison. So this right here is the base plate that I made for the roll cage. And this over here is the typical base plate that you're going to see for a roll cage that goes around the shock tower. So what they're going to do is it's basically just a square sheet of metal. You kind of just tack it in place on one side. You hammer it around and you just keep welding it as is. And then that way it wraps around the shock tower. You can tell the difference in craftsmanship and thought process and just the overall workmanship that goes into the base plates when you're going to compare your standard base plate like this compared to a base plate like this, which ties into the floor design. It's capping off the top of the shock tower. This is basically making an entire new structure that could almost replace your stock strut tower. And of course, with careful consideration of the rules state that it has to be within 100 square inches. So this right here, I've already calculated it, and overestimating, it's going to be at 93 square inches. Taking out the cuts and everything, I'm guessing it's more around the 85 square inch mark for each base plate. So that fits well within the rules, and it's overall really nice design, really strong design, really ties in the car, and yeah, definitely worth the time put into this. I have the car slightly jacked up, so it's not putting any real weight on the shock towers, but I do have it clamped into the coilover so that way I can tack it in place and then weld around the base of it and make sure that the top of it stays flat and nothing gets a little wonky up there. Also, in case you guys are curious, the car right now is jacked up on the diff, and the coilover is actually drooped, and it's actually bolted in just to keep it from warping or anything like that. But yeah, there's no jack stands under it or anything like that, because jack stands usually make the car kind of sit uneven, and I don't want to weld base plates with the thing on jack stands. So it's on the diff, and that seems like the most even way to get the frame at. Yeah. Get her around from the back side, eh?
Infinite power. Infinite power.
So now that everything is welded to here, the last spot to do is around the coilover. And so now is when I'm actually going to unbolt the coilover. There really isn't a chance of warping at this point. It's going to stay pretty much flat. I'm just going to hit up the inside and that's it. Okay, so settings are 4 for volts, 60 for wire speed. For doing the 12 gauge to 12 gauge, we're using 8 volts, 70 wire speed. The wire is it's a Lincoln wire. It's the ER706-S basically equivalent. The CFH on the gas, it's C25, 75% argon, 25% CO2. Running it like around between 15 to 20 CFH. And there we go, bud. So that wraps that up. The side hoop base plates towards the front end of the car, those ones still aren't fully welded in yet because those are basically going to get removed so that way the cage can drop down and then move forward, and then I can weld all the way around the top of the roll cage. So those ones aren't fully welded in until the cage is actually almost completely done. And you know, if you want to fucking support the channel, I got stickers for sale. And yeah, like I said last video, I finally got my store up, so offbeatgarage.com, and I finally have some merchandise for you guys to buy. So this is stickers, and I also have hats and stuff, like the one I'm wearing. And of course, as always, rocking the What Monsters Do t-shirt with, you know, coupon code TheTruth. So the next video, it should be me putting in the main hoop and probably doing the rear hoop supports. That's probably what's going to be in the next video. That's some good stuff right there, buddy. Oh yeah, buddy. Yeah, buddy. Oh.